and waiting to contribute to this amendment bill, to this bill. I've just been trying to look back over the year of 2024 and figure out if I can calculate or remember how many fundraisers I have been requested to participate in. And to be honest, Mr. Speaker, I haven't thought of 1 week so far this year that I have not had to fundraise for one or two or multiple different types of appeals. And more recently, Mr. Speaker, just this month, it was with profound sorrow that I learned the passing of Eunice Kwindwa, formerly of Central Bank of Kenya. She died on Sunday, 3rd of November, and will be buried just this weekend on the 16th in her home county of Tana River. Mr. Speaker, Mama Eunice was the devoted wife of the late Ambassador Fares Kwindwa, EGH EBS, who actually served as Secretary to the Cabinet and Head of Public Service. She was a cherished mother of Sharuti, Kido, Olympia, Abaria, Kirongo, and Maombi. And Mr. Speaker, these 5 children are friends of mine, family friends. We lived together in Mombasa, we schooled together in Mombasa, and it pains me to have to accept that they've lost their father before, the late Ambassador Fares, and now their mother to cancer. And it was just yesterday, actually, when we sat here in this house and considered in the Committee of the Whole the Cancer Prevention Bill. So all of these things put together, and now considering this bill before us, really makes me have mixed feelings about how we're going to implement this in the fairest way possible, Mr. Speaker. And I really enjoyed your contribution, actually, Speaker, when you did so just a few minutes back. You really had a considered view of all the different clauses that you felt had to be relooked, and that's what I have also been doing. Speaker, I've been thinking about my friends, kids to Mama Eunice, and as we're considering this bill, I'm wondering how we are to, if I was to take this bill, if it was already enacted, for example, how would I speak to my friends and tell them, I'm so sorry for your loss, but before we go any further, we have to make sure that we are complying with the legislation that has been put in place, which requires you to do this, it requires you to do that, it needs licenses, it needs registrations, it needs all sorts, Mr. Speaker, as outlined in the bill. How would I start explaining that to people who are bereaved, who have lost their parents, who are now orphans? And thank God they are people who are now adults, just like I am, and they have been blessed enough to land on their feet, all 5 of them. But what if it was a family that didn't have that luxury? What if all the kids were minors, for example, and had to bury their parents or their mother this weekend? How would you ask minors to start going through all of these processes outlined in this bill? And how would that be fair to ask that of people who are grieving and tell them that there are timelines and that there are processes in which to follow? Otherwise, they will be contrary to the law and could face fines and even jail time if they don't do so, Mr. Speaker. That's a difficult conversation. I also thought about what of the cases where people have multiple fundraisers that they're doing at the same time. For example, bringing a body home from abroad where somebody has passed away. That's one type of fundraising appeal, perhaps. Then maybe another committee within the same family is taking care of the funeral costs now in the home county of the deceased person. And maybe there is a third fundraiser because they have to think about the children of that deceased person and how they're going to go to school. So in one family, there could be multiple fundraisers which are going on concurrently. How do we deal with that through this bill? Mr. Speaker, like I said as well, how do you deal with, how does this bill deal with situations where, for example, you're looking at people who are marginalized groups? How do you ask For example, Mr. Speaker, I know in Nakuru County, I support a young lady whose mother is schizophrenic, severely so, and she's only in her early 20s, just a young girl, taking care of her mother who can't take care of herself. What if, in her case, because she needs fundraising, which is continuous, to get medication for her mother, which is very expensive in light of schizophrenia and those kinds of intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, which are also invisible, how do we then convince or support such a situation through this bill? I think there are several things that we haven't really considered about the real life situation of what is going on the ground. And there are some, and I do understand the objectives from the majority leader, which I read through in of my contribution, which are very noble and, to be honest, very progressive in my view. I just think that we are a democracy that isn't quite there yet because the majority of our population are still very, very needy in many, many ways. If this was Switzerland, or if this was Australia, or if this was the United States, Canada, perhaps we could think about